She refilled the woman's wine glass with steady hands, even as insults slid off her tongue like silk. Then, in the softest voice, the waitress said something no one ever had, and the room went still. If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because, tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's get into it. Most staff at the Highvale Country Club didn't look her in the eye. Veronica Maddox, wife of steel magnate Conrad Maddox, moved through the world with a silence that stung harder than words. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She made you feel beneath her, and somehow grateful for the chance. But Ava Cole had learned a long time ago, silence was a language too. And she spoke it fluently. She didn't try to impress anyone. Didn't soften her voice or widen her smile just to make guests comfortable. She moved with care. Spoke only when spoken to. And watched everything. That Friday evening, the private dining hall was glowing with soft jazz and laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. A retirement dinner for one of Conrad Maddox's VPs, 10 figures sat around a long table. Ava moved quietly, refilling wine glasses and whisking away half-finished hors d'oeuvres. Her eyes met Veronica's only once. The woman didn't blink, didn't smile, just stared. Back in the kitchen, Ava leaned against the wall, letting her heartbeat slow. Jasmine, another waitress, hissed under her breath, "She's in a mood." "Veronica?" Jasmine nodded. "Sent a busboy home for bringing the wrong brand of mineral water." Ava shook her head. "Some people like the sound of fear." Jasmine looked toward the doorway. "Well, she's got plenty of it." Veronica sat with perfect posture. Everything about her was controlled. Her hair, her lipstick, the tilt of her champagne flute. She didn't drink much. Just enough to sharpen the blade in her voice. When Ava approached with the entree, Veronica spoke without turning. "You've worked here long?" Ava set the plate down. "Yes, ma'am." Veronica finally looked up. "You carry yourself like someone who thinks she belongs at the table." Ava met her gaze. "I carry myself like someone who knows where she stands." Veronica's smile didn't touch her eyes. "Good. It's easier that way." The rest of the table didn't notice the exchange. But Veronica did. And so did Ava. 2 hours later, as guests filed out and staff began clearing dishes, Ava found herself alone in the hallway behind the main dining room, washing her hands in a side sink. Veronica appeared in the reflection of the mirror behind her. "I assume you think you did well tonight," she said calmly. Ava dried her hands. Turned. "I did my job." Veronica stepped closer. Not threatening. Just present. "You think dignity is something you wear like armor, don't you?" Ava's voice was even. "I think some people mistake cruelty for elegance." The words hung there. Heavy. Unapologetic. Veronica's lips parted, then closed again. Something flickered behind her eyes. Then she turned, heels echoing against the marble as she disappeared down the corridor. Back in the staff room, Jasmine's eyes widened when Ava walked in. "What did you say to her?" Ava didn't answer right away. Then, something she wasn't used to hearing. Meanwhile, Veronica sat in the back of her town car, the words replaying in her mind. Cruelty mistaken for elegance. No one had ever spoken to her that way. And worse, no one had meant it the way Ava had. Not with spite, but with truth. She told herself it was nothing. But her chest stayed tight all the way home. The Sunday brunch crowd at Highvale was quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that meant money had walked in and everyone knew better than to make noise. Veronica Maddox arrived in a fitted cream suit and a stare that could silence a songbird. Her husband, Conrad, trailed behind her like an accessory, handsome, disengaged, barely touching the small of her back. Ava saw them from across the floor. She didn't flinch. Just moved with precision, balancing a tray of mimosas past 2 hedge fund managers and their wives. 30 minutes in, Veronica was already displeased. Wrong linen color. Too much pulp in the orange juice. The waiter who forgot to pull her chair out fast enough. Every mistake was corrected with a tone that sliced deeper than raised voices ever could. But when Ava approached her table, something shifted. Veronica's smile tightened. "Aren't you the one with the opinions?" Ava met her gaze. Just here to serve, ma'am. Shame. You had a spine the other night. I rather enjoyed it. A few of the guests turned slightly, trying not to appear like they were listening. Ava remained calm. I'd prefer to keep things professional. But that's the thing about people like you, Veronica said, picking up her napkin. You believe that dignity earns you protection. Ava placed the carafe on the table slowly. And people like you mistake cruelty for strength. Veronica's head lifted slightly. The table went silent. One of the wives coughed quietly into her glass. Ava straightened. No raised voice. No shift in posture. Just truth. I've worked here for 3 years. I've seen guests come and go. Rich men pretend to be kings. Their wives sit beside them, untouched and unkind. Her voice never rose. But not one has ever made me question my worth. Until now. Conrad turned slightly, brows raised. Veronica, what's going on? She didn't respond. Couldn't. Her jaw clenched, but her voice refused to work. Ava continued. I may wear an apron, but I see everything. The silence between you and your husband. The way you correct people so you don't have to look at yourself. The fear you've built around you, so no one ever tells you the truth. The pause. You're not feared because you're powerful, ma'am. You're feared because you make people feel small. The words fell like quiet stones in a still pond. Ripples moved across the table. No one dared speak. No one dared leave. Veronica's hand shook slightly as she reached for her water. But her grip slipped. The glass tipped. Water spilled across her lap. She gasped. Those eyes wide. Not with rage. But something far rarer. Shame. Ava stepped forward, calm as ever. Held out a napkin. Veronica stared at it like it burned. Ava didn't move. I'm offering you grace, she said, voice steady. The kind no one ever offered me. What you do with it is your choice. And in that moment, something cracked. The woman everyone feared blinked. Her breath hitched. And she whispered, I'm sorry. Not loud. Not forced. Not for show. It was real. It was trembling. And it belonged to Ava, not anyone else in the room. Ava gave a single nod. Then turned and walked away. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just full. Back in the staff hallway, Jasmine stared at her like she'd just witnessed a miracle. What did you do? Ava folded the spare napkin, hand steady. I told the truth. Outside, Veronica sat alone in the car while Conrad spoke to someone on the phone. She touched her reflection in the window. And for the first time in years, she didn't recognize herself. Even after the apology, both women will retreat, Veronica to protect what's left of her pride, Ava to avoid being made a spectacle. But something's changed. And neither of them can ignore it. On Monday morning, Veronica Maddox arrived at the country club wearing sunglasses that didn't match the cloudy sky. She breezed past the greeter without saying a word. Straight spine. Silent heels. The staff stiffened when they saw her. Even the ones who hadn't witnessed what happened on Sunday knew something had cracked. But no one mentioned it. And Veronica? She said nothing. Ava kept her distance. She didn't expect another confrontation. But she also didn't expect the tightness in her chest every time she passed Veronica's table and felt those eyes on her. Watching. Studying. Not cruel. Not mocking. Just searching. Back in the kitchen, Jasmine tried to joke. Girl, you had her apologizing like a confession priest. Ava gave a small smile. But her mind was elsewhere. She didn't regret what she said. But she'd seen it before, how people turn apologies into performance, then retreat to the comfort of their control. She wasn't interested in being someone's epiphany. Especially not hers. Meanwhile, Veronica stared at her untouched salad. Conrad sat across from her, reading emails, sipping wine. They hadn't spoken about the brunch. He hadn't asked. And that stung more than the words Ava had spoken. When had he stopped seeing her? Or worse, when had she stopped being worth seeing? Later that evening, Veronica stood at her vanity, removing her earrings with trembling hands. Her reflection looked perfect. But something in her posture had collapsed. The moment Ava spoke, she hadn't felt insulted. She'd felt known. And that terrified her. Because if someone who served her could see her that clearly, What did that say about everyone else? She thought about sending flowers. An envelope. A note. She drafted it 5 times. Deleted each one. Veronica Maddox didn't chase dignity. She designed it. Controlled it. But this wasn't about control anymore. And that made her feel dangerously human. Ava, on the other hand, found herself wiping down silverware slower than usual. She'd meant every word she said. But now, guests stared at her a little longer. Managers smiled a little tighter. As if waiting for her to misstep. As if speaking truth had somehow made her unstable. That Thursday, Ava found a cream-colored envelope in her locker. No name. No return address. Inside, a single handwritten sentence. You didn't just make me see myself, you made me feel it. I hate that. But I think I needed it. No signature. But she didn't need one. She folded the note, slid it into her apron pocket. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't smile. Just returned to work. But her steps felt a little steadier. Veronica sat in her car that night, watching rain trace slow lines down the windshield. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just let the silence be uncomfortable. Let it stretch. Because maybe that's what change sounded like. Not thunder. But stillness. An unexpected situation pushes Ava and Veronica into the same space. Again. Not out of choice. But necessity. And this time, there's no staff watching. No audience. Just 2 women, and everything unspoken still hanging in the air. Would you like me to continue with Act 4? Excellent. Now we step into Act 4, Forced Proximity, where circumstance draws Ava and Veronica back into the same space. Without roles, without spectators, and without anything to hide behind. There's tension but not hostility. There's discomfort, but also a quiet invitation, stay. This act is not about fixing things, it's about acknowledging what's there. They don't trust each other yet, but something between them refuses to stay buried. No repetition. No clunky transitions. Just clean, character-driven movement. The fundraiser was for a literacy initiative, one of those quiet, high-society events where everyone arrived pretending to care, but most just came to be photographed. Ava only agreed to volunteer because the nonprofit had helped her sister's son last year. It felt personal. She didn't know Veronica Maddox would be there. The venue was a repurposed library, gorgeous, echoing, and vastly underheated. Ava stood near the makeshift bar, arranging name tags. That's when she heard the voice. Not sharp. Not commanding. Just nearby. I wasn't expecting to see you here. She turned. Veronica. In navy velvet, hair pinned, eyes calmer than they'd been. Ava gave a short nod. Same. Veronica glanced around. The event organizer cornered me into hosting a table. It wasn't optional. Ava raised an eyebrow. You don't seem like someone who does things unwillingly. Veronica's smile barely curved. You'd be surprised. A brief silence stretched between them. Not tense. Just uncertain. Veronica shifted her clutch in her hands. I read about this place, she said. Used to be the first public library in the county. Ava looked toward the tall shelves, still lined with forgotten books. My mother brought me here when I was little, she said. When it still smelled like paper and glue. Another pause. You came back, Veronica said quietly. I didn't leave, Ava replied. You did. The words weren't cruel. Just honest. Veronica absorbed them. Didn't argue. A commotion near the back of the room. One of the volunteers slipped, dropped a tray of glasses. Ava moved first, instinctively. Veronica followed without hesitation. They ended up side by side, on their knees, collecting shards and napkins. No photographers. No audience. Just 2 women in designer clothes, crouched beside broken glass. Funny, Veronica murmured. I thought I was above this. You were. Veronica looked up. Ava met her eyes. Now you're in it. That's different. They stood, hands wet with water, fingers red from a shallow nick on Veronica's palm. Ava reached into her apron, pulled out a folded Band-Aid. Veronica hesitated, then held out her hand. Let Ava place it gently. Wrap it carefully, like she deserved to be tended to. Later, They found themselves seated at the same table. Not planned. Just unavoidable. Dinner passed with polite chatter. A toast. A thank you speech. Then, slowly, guests began to leave. Ava stood to gather materials. But Veronica spoke. I meant what I wrote. Ava paused. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't ask for an apology. Veronica exhaled. Then why did it matter? Ava looked at her. Because no one else ever made you cry. Veronica's laugh was soft. Surprised. A first, then. No, Ava said. A beginning. They walked out together. Not close. Not far. Just beside each other. In a parking lot with no drivers waiting. Under a sky too cold for spring. Veronica glanced up. You ever think about leaving this place? All the time. Then why don't you? Ava looked at her. Because sometimes you don't need to leave to change something. Veronica nodded slowly. And for once, said nothing back. The art space on Broad Street had been converted into a small gallery, a fundraiser for local schools. Veronica arrived late. Ava had already been helping for over an hour. They didn't plan to talk. But when the event slowed and the air began to settle, they found themselves at the same table again, folding programs, counting donation slips. This time, Ava broke the silence. You always like sitting at the edge of things? Veronica shrugged. It's easier to leave when no one expects you to stay. Ava looked at her. You always leave? Not always, she said. Just before it gets real. They kept folding in silence for a while. Then Veronica spoke, her voice lower, but sure. My mother was a housekeeper in Connecticut. Wealthy family. Big estate. The kind where kids grow up in white linen and never learn their help's last names. Ava blinked. Veronica didn't pause. She fell in love with a driver. My father. But, quiet. She lost the job. Lost her parents. He left before I was 5. Ava said nothing. Just folded another program. Veronica continued. We moved a lot. I learned early, the louder you are, the less they see where you come from. A small, bitter smile. I built the version of me they couldn't touch. Polished. Unapologetic. She looked over. Turns out you can be all those things, and still feel invisible. Ava didn't offer sympathy. She didn't flinch either. She simply said, so you made yourself untouchable. I thought it would keep me safe. Ava nodded slowly. Sometimes, surviving feels like a crime you have to keep committing. Veronica's gaze dropped to her hands. I was so scared of being dismissed that I became the thing people wouldn't dare ignore. But you forgot something, Ava said. What? There's a difference between being seen and being respected. Veronica looked up. And this time, her silence wasn't pride. It was grief. Back in the hallway, the event organizer called for them. But neither woman stood. Not right away. Because the moment had formed something neither expected. Stillness that didn't need control. Ava placed the last folded paper into the tray and spoke gently. You didn't have to tell me that. I know. But I'm glad you did. Veronica gave a faint nod. Not gratitude. Not apology. Just agreement. They walked out together under soft gallery lights. Not talking. Not avoiding each other. Just moving at the same pace. Veronica slid her coat over her shoulders. Before getting into her car, she said quietly, I've spent most of my life choosing silence over softness. Ava replied, then maybe this is the part where you unlearn it. She didn't answer right away. But when the door shut, her eyes lingered on Ava through the glass for one long breath. Then she drove off. Ava stood there in the cold, watching the taillights disappear. And for the first time since that Sunday brunch, she didn't feel like she just made someone cry. She felt like she'd helped someone finally feel it. It started with a call. Not from Veronica. From the local library director. They were planning a donor luncheon. Short notice. One of the speakers dropped out. Veronica Maddox suggested you, the woman said to Ava over the phone. Said you'd speak well about community access. Ava blinked. Wait, she recommended me? She said you have first-hand experience. and that you're the kind of voice we need more of. A week later, Ava stood behind a wooden podium, heart steady as she spoke to a modest room of teachers, donors, and volunteers. She didn't talk about money. She talked about what it meant to be given a seat at the table when you were never invited. At the back of the room, Veronica stood, coat still on, sunglasses in hand, watching without interrupting. When it ended, she didn't approach. She simply nodded once, turned, and left. But Ava saw it, and smiled. 2 days later, Ava received a small package at work. Inside, a leather journal, embossed with her initials. No note, no name, just something useful, thoughtful, quiet. They met again by accident. Or maybe not. The corner cafe by the river, the one with chipped mugs and cheap chairs. Ava had just ordered. Veronica walked in 5 minutes later, brows raised slightly. You don't seem like a latte kind of woman. I'm not, Ava said. I like things bitter and strong. Veronica gave the faintest smile. Fitting. They shared a table. No formal invitation. Just two women tired of pretending they weren't aware of each other's presence. The conversation was light. It was weather. A rude columnist in the Sunday paper. It felt normal. But under that, something real was taking root. You always drink your coffee black? Veronica asked. Grew up that way, Ava said. Couldn't afford sugar. Veronica looked down at her cup. I add sugar, but it still tastes bitter. Ava glanced at her. Maybe it's not the coffee. They both laughed. And didn't look away. Outside, they walked the block together. Side by side. Not pressed for time. Veronica said, You know I'm not good at this. Ava said, Neither am I. Veronica hesitated. Then why does it feel easy? Ava answered without smiling, Because we stopped trying to win. That night, Veronica sat at her kitchen counter with Conrad across from her. He read the news. She stared at her untouched tea. Eventually she said, I saw Ava today. He didn't look up. The waitress. No, she said. The woman who reminds me I'm still allowed to be a person. The next morning, Ava opened her journal and found a line written at the bottom of the first page. Delicate. For the words you were never given permission to say. She closed the journal gently. And breathed. It began with a headline. Buried on the 4th page of the Whitley Weekly. Highvale waitress gives surprisingly poised speech at literacy event, thanks to Veronica Maddox. Ava read it in the back room during her break. She didn't need to read the full article. The headline said enough. The kindest thing she'd done, the most honest moment she'd lived, had just been turned into a credit line for a woman who'd once made her feel invisible. She didn't cry. She just folded the paper, placed it in her locker, and went back to pouring coffee for people who wouldn't remember her name by dessert. Veronica read the article too. She hadn't approved it, hadn't even spoken to the press. But someone had. A donor. A board member. Someone well-meaning who thought they'd be elevating the story. And now it read like Veronica had given Ava a platform. Like it hadn't been earned. She found Ava at the cafe after closing. No driver. No makeup. Just Veronica, standing in a sweatshirt, looking unsure for the first time in a long time. Ava opened the back door halfway. Didn't expect to see you. I didn't expect that article. Ava raised an eyebrow. But you didn't correct it. Veronica hesitated. I didn't know what to say. Ava folded her arms. Try. I didn't want people to know I wasn't the main character this time. That hit harder than she expected. Veronica didn't flinch. But her voice got quiet. I didn't mean for it to come out like that. But it did, Ava said. And you let it. Silence. Veronica shifted on her feet. I've spent years being the headline, she said. It's how I survived. I'm not your survival story. I know. Ava stepped back slightly. You said you saw me. But now it feels like you just used me to soften your own image. Veronica's eyes flickered. That's not what happened. But that's what they printed. Ava's jaw tightened. I finally stopped hiding. And now the story is about how kind you are. Veronica's face dropped. Not with offense, but with regret. She whispered, I don't know how to fix it. Ava shook her head. Maybe this isn't yours to fix. Veronica took one step forward, then stopped. For the first time since they'd met, she looked lost. I didn't want to be the villain in your story anymore. Ava met her eyes, then stopped taking the pen. Neither spoke. Ava slowly closed the door. Gently. Not out of cruelty, but because if she didn't, she might forgive her too quickly. And that wouldn't be fair, not to herself. Back in her car, Veronica sat with her hands in her lap, the dashboard light painting her face. She didn't cry, but something in her collapsed. Because the truth was, she didn't just want to be forgiven. She wanted to be trusted. And that would take more than good intentions and pretty articles. It would take silence. And staying. Ava stood in the kitchen, wiping down the same countertop twice. Her heart didn't ache. Not exactly. But it hardened. Because she'd hoped. And hope, for people like her, came with consequences. Ava didn't speak to anyone about the article. Not Jasmine. Not her sister. Not her manager. She just moved through the week with a kind of practiced grace, present, polite, but unreachable. She still wrote in the journal. But her handwriting looked different now. Sharper. Less sure. On Thursday morning, she walked past the corner where she and Veronica had shared coffee. The cafe door was open. But she didn't go in. Didn't pause. Didn't look around. Veronica sat in her office, phone dark on the desk. A copy of the article folded neatly beside her. She'd read it 5 times. Maybe more. Each time, the same sentence caught her. As recommended by Veronica Maddox, who continues to uplift the voices of those around her. She didn't even remember saying those words. But she could hear the performance in them. And she hated it. She tried writing a statement. Then tore it in half. Tried a letter. Tried silence. Nothing felt right. Because this time, she couldn't fix it with power. This time, she had to earn her way back, with nothing but the truth. Saturday morning, Ava was restocking the tea bar when a courier walked in. No uniform. Just a young man in jeans, holding a small black envelope. For you, he said. No signature. No sender. Just her name in careful handwriting. Inside, a single line. I'm still learning how to be someone you don't have to recover from. Underneath it, a card for the same art gallery where they'd once folded programs together. Tonight. 6 p.m. No demand. No promise. Just an opening. Ava read the line again. Folded the card. And went back to work. But her hands were a little less steady. That night, she stood outside the gallery for almost 10 minutes before walking in. The room smelled of paint and clean wood. Music played softly overhead. People mingled. No one noticed her. Until they did. Because Veronica Maddox stood alone, near a canvas in the back. No handlers. No curated smile. Just her. Ava approached slowly. Veronica turned. Didn't smile. Didn't reach. She just said, I didn't know how to be honest, without making it about me. Ava nodded once. That's the problem with people used to the spotlight. They forget other people live in the dark. Veronica looked down. I didn't mean to take anything from you. I know, Ava said. But it doesn't mean you didn't. They stood there quiet. The distance between them now was no longer hostility, it was hesitation. Why'd you invite me here? Ava asked. Veronica gestured toward the painting beside her. It was abstract. Rough strokes. Sharp edges. Deep color. I commissioned it, she said. By a local artist I'd never heard of. He said it was based on a moment where someone finally told him the truth, and he couldn't pretend afterward. She looked at Ava. I thought, maybe we could both sit with it. For a while. Ava didn't answer. She just stepped closer to the painting. Let her eyes settle on the chaos of it. Let her breath slow. Let herself stay. They didn't fix anything that night. But they stayed in the same space. And that, for both of them, was more than they'd ever allowed before. The library received an anonymous donation 2 weeks later. Enough to fund 2 full-time literacy mentors. The check came with no name. But the handwriting on the envelope matched the journal Ava still wrote in. Inside, a simple note. For the words I once buried in silence. Let someone else find theirs sooner. Ava didn't frame the note. She didn't mention it. But she folded it and tucked it between the pages of her favorite book, Beloved, where it belonged. The next time she saw Veronica wasn't at a gala. It wasn't at the club or in passing. It was at the small neighborhood art walk Ava's sister helped organize, modest, with folding chairs and kids drawing with chalk on the sidewalk. Ava was reading poetry aloud when she noticed her. Veronica, standing just behind the circle of plastic chairs. No heels. No press. Just there. After the reading, Veronica approached slowly. I didn't come to be seen, she said. I know. I came because I wanted to remember what it feels like to listen. Ava tilted her head. And? Veronica gave a small nod. I think I'm finally ready to stop being the headline. They sat together on the curb. Quiet. No crowd. Kids laughed nearby. A street vendor called out sandwich orders. Neither woman rushed to fill the silence. Eventually, Ava said, You don't owe me anything. Veronica looked over. That's the point. I'm here anyway. 3 days later, Veronica sent a message through the gallery owner. She was stepping down from the board of the country club. Not in protest. Not in drama. She just didn't belong there anymore. Ava returned to her usual rhythm. But she noticed things had changed. Not in big ways. But in the small details that matter. The cafe where she worked added a bookshelf, curated by her. A nonprofit reached out to ask if she'd speak again. This time, paid. And when Veronica sent people her way for commissions or projects, she never took the credit. One Sunday morning, Veronica stopped by the cafe. Just one customer among many. No fanfare. Ava poured her coffee. Black, no sugar. She raised an eyebrow. Still bitter? Veronica smiled faintly. No. Just honest. They didn't sit together. But when Veronica left, she placed a folded napkin on the table. Ava opened it once she was alone. Inside, in steady handwriting. Everyone feared me because I never flinched. But you? You looked at me and saw the part one couldn't hide. And you stayed. The pause. The second line. You didn't just make me apologize. You helped me become someone who meant it. Ava folded the napkin, placed it in her apron, and got back to work. But this time, she moved lighter, because what she'd said had landed. Not just in the room that day weeks ago, but in a heart that had never once been told it could soften and still survive. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause a scene. She simply told the truth, and for the first time, someone powerful didn't look away. Has someone ever told you the truth when it was the hardest thing to hear, but exactly what you needed? Or maybe you were the one brave enough to speak it. Drop your story in the comments. We want to hear it. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.